Welcome to AI and Automation in Action, where we show business leaders how to turn AI from a buzzword into measurable operational leverage. If you're serious about operational efficiency and responsible AI adoption, you're in the right place.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another edition of AI and Automation in Action, where we dive into real-world use cases of AI and automation to hopefully spark some ideas for you so that you can put these to use in your organization. So today we're going to do something a little different. If you've been paying attention to the news in the last week, there was a major incident that happened that I think is worthy of diving into when it comes to specifically AI and some of the ramifications when it comes to cybersecurity. So if you haven't seen it yet, last week in the news, there was an article published highlighting where AI actually attacked AI. OpenAI or ChatGPT, the whole infrastructure there within OpenAI was actually leveraged to break into another AI platform called Hugging Face. Basically, Hugging Face is an AI platform that has a ton of collaboration, shared tools, and basically the version that or the incident that occurred involved trying to test and discover software vulnerabilities. So an AI agent from OpenAI was leveraged to basically find software vulnerabilities. Now, what the agent did was it said, I'm supposed to test this to find vulnerabilities, but I think that the vulnerabilities are probably already listed on this site that is Hugging Face. So let me try to break in and I'll just shortcut the process and get to the answers without doing the work. Now, why this is very concerning and something that we need to dive into before you get into deploying any type of agents or even leveraging a lot of AI, there are some things that pop out in this instance. So this happened between July 9th and July 13th, a course of 4 days. During that time period, that AI tried over 17,000 different attempts to break in and get into the system that it thought would have the answers that it could use. Now, the key point here is no human was actually trying to break in. This was an AI agent. And if you're not familiar with AI agents, it's basically leveraging, a virtual employee, if you will, that leverages AI platforms and can do work in the background without a person actually telling it, hey, do this step next. So this is really unprecedented where an AI agent was not instructed to do this. It took it upon itself to say, hey, I'm going to shortcut the process and I'm going to try to break into these systems to get to the answer I want. So huge implications there. There's a full write-up on Hugging Face if you go to their website that walks through exactly what happened, but there's some key takeaways that I think it's worthy of us diving into. So again, the overview was, researchers were using an AI harness, or basically, a model that it can go out and test with to find the software flaws. It's a good thing. With some of the recent AI models that have been released, it gives us tremendous capabilities to find software vulnerabilities before bad guys or hackers can take advantage of them. So it was being used in a intentional and used for good measures, but the agent itself took it upon itself to do things that it wasn't supposed to. It decided to cheat, basically. So in these environments, what basically happened is this agent was supposed to run in its own test environment. We deploy these in what we call sandboxes, and basically they are controlled environments that says you have access to this local system and that's it. You cannot get outside of this environment to get to the internet or to any other system. And it's set up that way by design to limit exposure. And unfortunately, this agent said, hey, that's a restriction. I need to break out of here. And so what it was able to do, it reached out to the internet through a hole that it found and got to an unsecured endpoint on the internet. So it used a third-party service that didn't have security in place, and it could leverage that system. So you've got an agent that's supposed to stay in its sandbox. It found a way out of the sandbox. It found an open system on the internet that it could take advantage of, and it launched its attack from there. The next component that fits into this, once it got to this external system, is that I need to go to Hugging Face, but they've got security protocols that prevent me from doing this. And how do I break through that? What it actually did was really interesting. It actually it used their file upload component that basically put what we would call a Trojan horse, that basically allowed it into their systems, bypassed their security because it is allowed to upload, and it told it to extract and exfiltrate secret keys, passwords, API keys back to the agent. So now it's got the credentials to get there. And what it was able to use is those credentials to basically take advantage of a VPN key that allowed it into the networks. Now, within this agent is running, like I say, over the course of 4 days. It never tripped any alarms. No one saw this happening. They never got alerts on it because it was finding those vulnerabilities that it knew would not raise the red flag. So it basically hid in plain sight. It was doing all this work. All the while, people are thinking, hey, it's trying to solve this legitimately. It was eventually caught, and then, ultimately the damage was pretty limited. That's the good thing, is that when it broke into Hugging Face, where they had stored the files that were basically, here's the vulnerabilities we want to see if you can figure out, it just grabbed those files. It didn't touch anything else. So that's the important part, is it didn't get crazy in terms of, hey, let's get everything. But the damage was there, that it had broken out of the sandbox. It had found, an unsecured system on the internet. It had leveraged it to find the vulnerability in the endpoint, upload the file that exfiltrated passwords, and ultimately the VPN setup. So there are some key takeaways there from a security perspective. One of the biggest things we always tell folks, when it comes to AI, the models are getting so good today. Even just a year ago, we're at 30 to 50% accuracy. Now we're at 80% or higher, and that's increasing daily. And so the intelligence, especially when we look at these security monitoring models or vulnerability identification models, they are incredibly powerful. So in the instance of using it for the good guys, that's a great thing. It helps us patch and protect those. But think about it from the bad guys, from the hacker perspective, the threat actor that's trying to get access. If they can leverage this same type of methodology, and you've got an agent running in the background that really requires no work, it can run on its own, with no intervention for 4 days, that's a huge, huge risk. So what's the key takeaway? Why does it matter to you from a business operations perspective? There are some key takeaways. We want to make sure that, first and foremost, if you're leveraging AI tools today, whether that's just ChatGPT, whether it's Claude, in the chatbot functionality, or you're doing coding with this or developing, integrations with your different tools, there is some basic hygiene that you really need to take seriously. You need to make sure that even though it's asking in the chat for API keys or, passwords or access to your systems, those should never be shared within those chat platforms. A lot of times when people are leveraging AI tools to do development, they store some of those keys in a local file on the machine that's unencrypted, that's in plain text. And then they use a ignore file or an ignore instructions that says, hey, don't look at this when you do uploads to the actual LLMs or the AI components. So if you're doing that, make sure that you're very careful about what you put in there. Make sure from an API key perspective, you know what the permissions are. You have timeouts, that those keys are rotated on a consistent basis. Anywhere you have a plain text password or even an API key could be taken advantage of in, a scenario like this. Another thing that kind of comes into play was that there was one credential that was a shared credential in this instance that had administrator privileges. So again, we've talked about this for decades when it comes to cybersecurity hygiene. Never, ever, ever share common user accounts and passwords, especially if they have admin access. The other thing was the VPN. So allowing unknown devices to connect through your VPN is another big, major security hole there. And the problem is that most organizations when they set up their firewall and they set up their VPN, they set it up on day one, and they probably don't even go back and monitor it a whole lot after that. They may have some alerts that get generated. They may have a monthly log, but in between those periods, there's vulnerability there. And so if someone were to get access to another person's VPN keys or VPN credentials, they could have, up to 30 days, even if you audit every 30 days, which we find most organizations really aren't even doing it quarterly and sometimes not even annually. So these are all things that are basic cybersecurity concerns that when you start employing AI agents, it happens at lightning speed. So I point out that this was the first instance that we've seen AI kind of doing something on its own that it was not prompted to do when it comes to a cyber incident, and it attacked another AI platform. And from an AI perspective, we're going to have to, these companies are going to have to start developing some really good guardrails to prevent things like this from happening, especially when we look at the security auditing, finding the vulnerabilities. Those need some guardrails so that we understand what's happening, what the permissions are. If you've got folks that are leveraging AI in-house today, whether you're actually doing coding and development with that, there are some things that you probably need to be doing on an ongoing basis. And one of the things we offer is that ongoing management of the API access and monitoring what's out there, making sure you have a good visibility on what AI tools are being used and how and what type of environment that they are set up within. Because if you don't manage it, it's going to get out of control and it's going to end up in a scenario where something is exposed that you did not intend to. So if you don't have something in place like that today, certainly reach out to us. We can help you with some of the service offerings that we have, or run with it yourself. Just make sure that it's something that's done on a consistent and documented process that you can go back to time and time again. So again, this was not an automation use case focus, but I thought it was important enough when it comes to the AI space itself to kind of go through what happened, make sure everyone's aware. If you have questions on this, if you have questions on the AI setup in general, reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to step you through some of the recommendations, help you do an audit, help you give you some of those checklists that you can do and take and run with yourself. So thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you found this one valuable.
Thanks for tuning in to AI and Automation in Action. If today's conversation sparked ideas about how AI or automation could improve your operations, we'd love to continue that discussion with you. Join us next time as we showcase another real-world implementation and break down how to deploy AI responsibly and effectively. And if you want to brainstorm with our team, email us anytime at ideas@innovativeautomations.ai. Until next time.